everyone, it's MK. Welcome back. Wow, I got a lot of positive feedback about my last video on pantographs, and I want to let you know that I truly do my pantographs that way. Maybe not 100% of the time, but about 95% of the time, I use my simulator to set them up, and then I stitch them down when I'm ready at a quilt. In this video, I want to talk to you a little bit about offset pantographs. A few weeks ago, I posted on my Facebook group, the Pro Stitcher Sim Style group, about a pantograph that I was using where it was offset and start and stop points were created, and I used art and stitch to connect those. I got a lot of comments about that, and I had people asking me to share how I did that. So that's what this video is going to deal with. Now, since posting that and since thinking it through a little bit, I've actually realized there's a couple ways that I could have dealt with that. So I'm going to take you into Pro Stitcher Simulator. I'm going to talk through a couple of things, and then I'm also going to give you a little bit of tutorial inside of Art and Stitch, just a little bit. All right, so I'm going to meet you inside of Simulator, and then I'll be right back here.
All right, so here's the pattern that we're going to use. It's a beautiful feathered edge-to-edge called Nasa's Feather Edge-to-Edge. It's a Christy Dillon design. It's not free with your Pro Stitcher, but of course you can purchase it, and I love it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to resize it down a little bit for our example. And then I'm going to be following the same methodology as we did in my last video. I'm going to set this up using Simulator to a width wider than I would ever be able to use it. Make sure I depress point to point. Now in this example, I'm not going to take it up to the 130 inches like I did before, but if I was truly setting this up in my studio, that's exactly what I would do. The next thing is I'm going to repeat it vertically to an odd number. That's just how I handle offset pantographs. All right. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the grid on because now we're going to be working with our wrapping, our offsetting, and our distance. So let's come down here under wrapping. And we want to come down to the bottom and use our offset features. And this is the box that we're going to use. And that's going to offset it by half or 50%. So let's do that. The next thing, follow me over here to the right. I'm going to change this from open to closed. And what that does is create stitching lines for me on the sides. Again, remember, those stitching lines are going to be cropped off later when we're actually working at our quilt. Now we want to close the distance on these patterns. And we can use our Pro Stitcher grid system to tell us that this is 1, 2, almost 3 inches apart. So I'm going to go back to my main repeat menu, come back over here to distance, and I'm going to manually make this about a -3. And that might be a little close, and you can tweak the distance as needed. All right, the next thing I want you to notice is that I have not hit baseline up to this point. Normally, baseline is our friend, but when we're working with wrapping and offsetting, we don't want to depress baseline because that will make that functionality unavailable to us. I do, however, want to go ahead and save this, and I'm just going to call it 01 Master 7. And again, that's very similar to the name game that I used before. All right, now we want to deal with filling in this unquilted space up here. That's going to be done through wrapping again. So we're going to go back to repeat under wrapping, and this time we're going to come over here and we're going to use these functions over here. That's going to help us with vertical wrapping. I'm just going to depress this one. We're just going to do some trial and error here. I'm going to depress this one and see if that's what we want. Well, I don't think so. Let's come down here and hit undo. So that was just an example to show you that for the vertical wrapping, this is the box we're going to want. So let's depress that. And then I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I want you to notice one thing. Although it filled in the space nicely, the other thing it did was it cropped off this row. And this is ultimately going to become my first stitching row that I'm going to use over and over again in my quilt. So I don't want it to be cropped off. So I'm going to come back over here with my down arrow right here. I'm just going to click that one click at a time until that first full row is not cropped. All right, there we go. Now, at this point, I am going to baseline. That's going to take care of all of those start and stop points in the center. But you'll notice it didn't take care of the start and stop points at the top. So let's talk about that. I mentioned in my intro that there would be a couple of ways to deal with this. Now, the whole idea is I don't want my machine to stop every time it gets to a stop point. So the first way to accomplish that is to go under our settings before you stitch and address our auto jump number. Now, I normally leave my auto jump on 0. But in this case, I don't want it to stop every stop point. I want it to continue on between the points. So let's determine how far apart those points are. So this stop point to this start point is, it's about 2¼ inches or so. How about we just jump that up to 3? So let's make our auto jump 3. And that basically tells Pro Stitcher anything over 3 inches I'm going to continue on. Okay? So let's just simulate stitching for a little bit here so that you can see that. Now this is basically an okay method for you. The only thing that I want to mention is, and let me turn the grid off here. When the Pro Stitcher gets to this stop point, it's not actually going to stitch over here. Now this is a pretty small distance, so maybe it would be okay in that situation. But sometimes that distance is far apart. And I don't like my machine to pull on the thread all the way over to the next point. I just don't like it to have any effect on my tension or anything like that. So if this works for you, go ahead and use this method. The method that I'm going to show you now is a little bit of art and stitch to connect these points together so that they truly stitch out as stitching lines. All right, so let me stop this. I'm going to go ahead and save this pattern. And let's just call it our working pattern. So we'll open this up in Art and Stitch, and I'm going to show you a couple of very, very simple steps to get that to be a connected row. All right, here we go. All right, here we are inside of Art and Stitch. Just from the get-go, I want you to make sure that you understand that this is not going to be a full-fledged Art and Stitch tutorial because I am by no means an Art and Stitch expert. But I do know a couple of functions that help me with my Pro Stitcher work, and this is one of them. To get to this point, all I did was File, Open. This is the folder that I'm working from, and there's that working file that we created at Pro Stitcher. I'm going to select my Convert to Outlines box and hit Open so that we can work with this file. Now sometimes on my computer, if it's a large file, it'll take a bit to open, and sometimes it'll even say this not responding. I don't typically get upset about that because eventually it usually opens. All right, the next thing is we're going to be working in sequence view. So we want to be able to depress sequence. And then over here is a little icon with a plus sign. I'm going to depress that. And that's going to give us a listing of all of the stuff that's on our screen over here. Now these inside rows, we're not going to touch those at all. Those ones are ready to go. We're going to work with those in Pro Stitcher. And those are the rows that are indicated right here. They're all strung together. These are the rows, these ones right here. That's our top row. That relates to all of that. And then all of these separate units down here are what is indicated by these guys. So what we want to do now is select those units on the top and connect them together. There's a couple of different ways to select. Make sure that you have your select tool depressed. And what you can do is you can select these along the top one at a time by depressing Control on your keyboard and just clicking through these one at a time. The other way you can do it is actually from your sequence view over here. You can click on Run, hold Shift on your keyboard, and then click on the last unit in the string, and it'll highlight them all together. Whichever way you do it, the next thing we want to do is come over here to the left, and here's the button we're going to be using. It's called Connect Objects, and it's a really pretty powerful little tool in Art and Stitch. I'm just going to depress that button, And you'll notice now that all of those were condensed down from single units. Now they're in a run unit, just like the rest of our inside rows of our pantograph were. Let's do that again on the bottom rows. Even though when I stitch this at my Pro Stitcher, I'm never going to make it to the bottom row. I'm going to deal with cropping off the bottom of my quilt when I get to the bottom of my quilt. But just for practice, let's do it again. I just selected this one. I hit Shift and selected this one. My select pointer is already on, but just so that you know, select tool is right there. And then come down here and do the connect objects. And there again, you can see now that now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows, and each of them are completely connected rows. Now, we didn't adjust anything with our stitching in Art and Stitch. We're not really going to talk about that, but I just wanted to show you down here this slide bar. I'm just going to click and hold and drag this across. And that's how you can just kind of take a preview and see how it's going to stitch out in Pro Stitcher. Okay, we didn't touch those center rows. We just did the top and bottom, and now they're all connected. Next step, let's save it. I like to save it first as an Art and Stitch file, which of course is the default. So let's call it working again, and this time let's call it fixed. This is going to be the pattern that we want when we're back at our Pro Stitcher. Saving it as an Art and Stitch is not the last step. We need to save it one more time, and we'll save it as an HQF file. Working fixed is fine, and there we go. We don't care about the hoop size, so yes, we'll pass by that. Now, you can obviously do that step really, really quickly right from your Pro Stitcher tablet. I happen to be working on my laptop, so either way, you can push the design right from your Pro Stitcher tablet into Art and Stitch, fix that top row, and push it back to Pro Stitcher. Or you can take it to another device and work on it, which is what I did here. All right, I'm going to take you back to Pro Stitcher, and we're going to finish this up. All right, here we are back at Pro Stitcher. More than likely, the pattern that you were working on before is going to still be open. Well, we don't need that one, so let's just close. We're going to do open, and now we should have on our flash drive the one that we named fixed over at Art and Stitch, so I'm going to pull that up. Now I would be ready to use this pattern on a quilt. And just again, like the methodology from before, once I actually am ready to stitch this at my quilt, I would be marking an area. So let's pretend now that I have a quilt loaded. I would go into area. I would mark a 2-corner, come down towards my bar, come across wherever that is, and put another 2-corner. Just so that you know, my box here for my area was turned off, so I'm going to put that back on. You can see the area. I would treat it just like I did in the other video, probably make that about 40 inches high. Then I would align my pattern to the center and to the top and go and do my crop, closed, and outside. Okay, I am so glad that this happened actually. Notice how we had just a little snafu go on with our crop function just now. If this happens to you at any point when you're working through pantographs in this manner, don't panic, just hit undo. Basically what's happening is the stitching nodes, the nodes in this pattern are just too close to that top area box. All you have to do really quickly is come over to reposition, change this reposition, this nudge number to a small number. I usually change it to 0.02 or 0.03, and I just nudge that pattern down with the down arrow just slightly so that it gets it off of that purple line. Then if you go back to crop, closed, outside, 99% of the time that will take care of it. All right, guys, you would be ready to stitch. I would hit baseline, I would clear my area, I would name this file, and I would be ready to stitch. And now as I fade out, I'm going to let this stitch, and you'll see that it doesn't stop at all of those stop lines like it did before. It's going to stitch right on through. So I hope this has been helpful. I really appreciate all of your feedback, and I'm so very, very happy that this is helping you guys. All right, until next time, everyone, it's MK.
Still small voice cries out to my soul, come my love,
All right, we're back, and I just want to wrap up with one tip for you. If you choose to do your pantographs in this manner, whether they be regular pantographs or whether they be offset with wrapping, if you do the cropping on the edges and the top, and your machine is a little jerky as it stitches through that, just adjust your speed down a little bit and that should take care of it. I hope this has been helpful for you. You should be able to do your pantographs, either regular pantographs or the offset type, and just pay a little attention to your auto jump distance, or take it into Art and Stitch, connect that top row, and then it's all set for you the next time you want to lay it down, crop it off, and stitch. All right, everybody, until next time, it's MK, from my studio to yours. Happy quilting. Bye-bye.
My heart sings.